マジかよ I'm gonna kill you!
Yeah, people put your guns on mass or later on that. Hashima wa piyats lao gunshot. One you sound so fair survivor.
I've been reviewing anime for quite some time now. During this time, I've come across a couple of anime which have been very good, but the majority has been absolutely terrible. The anime which I consider good tends to be different from the norm in some way or another, and I am well aware that a lot of people are satisfied with most of today's anime, which is fine by me. The least I can say about anime in general is that, as a work of fiction, it's extremely varied with its topics it deals with, its different forms of storytelling, and sometimes even original and interesting plot. I judge an anime based on its characters, plot and direction mostly, and when none of that is any good, I then turn to the animation and music to get my enjoyment out of the anime. It's very rare for an anime to have bad music because the composer has nothing to do with the animators or writer or even the directors. And it just so happens that most anime I dislike have very good music, but that's besides the point. I think it's very interesting to note that when you ask someone what anime they enjoyed watching, you will always get a very polarizing answer. They will proceed to list you a number of anime they absolutely loved and then a number of anime they just despise, so that you can avoid them and not waste your time. Sometimes they might tell you to turn off your brain to watch a specific anime, in which case you should definitely not watch said anime. If you've been paying attention, you will start noticing a pattern here. There are two sides to anime really, the good and the bad. That's because there are really not many ways to tell a story nowadays, and when it comes to works of fiction, you often see the same ways used over and over again, so it ultimately boils down to how well said anime tells a story, even if said story is very generic. And because works of fiction tend to base their stories on insane events driven by coincidences and born from the writer's perception of a perfect dream world, people will tend to either love or hate the writer's perception of the aforementioned perfect dream world. This is precisely why criticizing anime in general is very frowned upon the anime community, because people usually tend to disagree with someone else's opinion on an anime, and that usually evolves into a very unpleasant argument, with both parties insulting each other, one of them loathing the anime in question and the other one not. Now I guess it's finally time to answer the question you all might have. What the fuck does any of this have to do with Gantz and my opinion on it? Well, I've always leaned towards the extreme, and by that I mean I've always either loved an anime to bits or hated it beyond belief. Whenever someone asks me what I think about a given anime, I tend to give the same answers based on the show, which is to say that I never have any conflicting opinions on an anime to the point where I don't know what to say. That was until I watched Gantz. I've watched quite a bit of anime, and I can honestly say that the medium is gigantic. Not only is it so varied that it's hard to decide what you feel like watching because there are so many different ones, but also because despite today's anime, which is mostly pure pandering bullshit, there are still a lot of anime which are very original in the way they present themselves, and Gantz is one of them. Gantz is an anime which came out in 2004 and was directed and produced by Funji TV and animated by Gonzo Studios. It centers around a high school boy named Kurono who, along with his childhood friend Masaru Kato, gets hit by a train when he tries to help a homeless man off the tracks and dies. The concept Gantz tries to establish is that death isn't really like we humans portray it. When you die in this universe, you get saved by Gantz, who is the closest thing to what I would call a god in this anime. Gantz as a character really just boils down to this big black ball, which gives written instructions on aliens Kurono and Kato will have to fight and kill, along with the rest of this cast. Gantz never speaks a word and appears to be sleeping inside his ball, which harbors a ton of sci-fi weapons, laser guns, and a very iconic suit. Once given instructions, the player has to put on the suit to make sure the odds are in their favor. It should be mentioned at this point that later in the anime, Kurono fights a boss without his suit on and kills it. From then on, the characters are teleported, or rather faxed, into the real world, and they need to find the specific alien to kill. They also have a GPS which can track aliens down, as well as the rest of the characters on the map. The anime explains this terribly, and I'm not gonna complain just yet. Gantz doesn't ever mention the exact number of aliens that need to be killed, and this is interesting because the player always has to expect to fight a boss once they've killed the first alien they encounter. Because Gantz is consistent and not shit as a game, it becomes progressively more difficult, and Kurono gains more and more experience, leading him to the final conclusion about Gantz at the very end, which we will discuss later. On a final note, the game becomes so hard that only Kurono, who has the most experience, is able to kill some of the stronger aliens later on. Gantz is a very strange show, and I realized this upon watching episode 1. It's a very polarizing anime, even for me, considering the criteria an anime needs to feel for me to consider it good. Very rarely does it feel as if a specific anime is just in between, when an anime ends up being neutral, meaning that it's not good nor bad. Unfortunately though, Gantz seems to balance itself more towards the bad side, with every episode pushing it further down this aforementioned bad side of things. I've mentioned earlier the vague concept of anime that is good and bad, but I want to expand a little upon this before we move on with this review. The fact of the matter is, there are anime which have extremely good and interesting ideas, and at the end of the day, if said anime is horrendous, then it means the ideas you tried to implement were executed poorly, and you will understand what I mean by all of this very soon, because Gantz is a potentially competent yet unfinished show at best, and a disastrous travesty at worst. I really do hope that by the end of this review I will finally come to terms with this anime and truly understand how I feel about it. Let's get started. Gantz is an old anime, and it shows. The art is extremely old looking in design, but also ironically quite detailed and clean. It is commendable that the characters don't have bulging eyes or crazy long limbs, and oddly enough resemble actual fucking people. It's this level of finesse that I've come to love about Gantz, and it's nothing short of impressive how the anime uses this to its advantage from the rest of the show. It becomes frustrating when you realize that the anime could have done so much more, but it didn't. Episode 18 looks amazing, and you will notice that it looks almost different from the rest of the show. That's because the animation is much more fluid and clean during parts of episode 18 and even 19. I saw this and asked myself why the anime didn't use this level of animation for their final confrontation, which was clearly a lot more interesting and had more movement going on. It's decisions like these which make me constantly question the direction in Gantz, and that's frustrating, to be fair, because it's not that bad. Gantz takes pride in its fight scenes, which are definitely second to none when it comes to sci-fi anime. The very dark yet clean color palette, along with the good shot composition and the pacing, manage to deliver an insane amount of action while being consistent, because, as I said, Gantz understands pacing. This is one side of Gantz, with the second one being what I came to dub as the Seinen side, which essentially refers to the anime's ability to develop most of its characters very well. I was very skeptical about the majority of the characters here, but that ended up being a mistake. Before I dive into the characters fully, because I think this video will be very long, it's time I come clean about my intentions in this discussion. We'll be splitting this review up in two parts, the technical side which we've already begun to talk about briefly, and we will continue to do so for a couple more minutes, and then part 2 will be the characters and plot, which we will dive into later. Getting back to the topic at hand, I mentioned animation and we also established that Gantz is a competent anime with its direction and cinematography, at least when it tries to be. All of the aforementioned could only be complemented by good music and editing, and you guessed it, Gantz nails that too. Most of the music here is very good, including the oddly catchy opening and the very light-hearted ending song. All of that creates a very interesting contrast considering all the themes the anime actually discusses. Because Gantz is so old though, it goes without saying that the opening visuals are not really the most impressive, but I feel like this is a cautionary tale to other directors to never spend their entire budget on the opening alone. Gantz also didn't fall into the trap of being too generic with the songs and the way it edits said songs. Let me explain. The anime is 26 episodes long and it only has 24 songs, unlike other anime which have far less episodes and 40 or more songs, anime which shall be nameless. But the editing in Gantz is also decent because the anime doesn't just start playing songs randomly, but it cuts out sections of the songs to create an actual atmosphere and tension within the plot. By doing the editing properly, Gantz already sets itself for success, and it's safe to assume that while most technical things I mentioned are never a breaking point in anime, they're still very important to me, so take what I said during this first section of the review with a grain of salt. With all of that out of the way, it's time I address another thing which also happens to fall under characterization as well: maturity and pretentiousness. I often see these words being used to describe certain anime, and to be honest, I've never seen those words used right. Ever. Gantz has a character which commits suicide and gets plunged into the game, but Gantz is about the serious topic of suicide about as much as it is about the topic of love or even aliens, which is to say that it isn't about any of them. Yes, Gantz may or may not have characters having sex and others developing feelings for each other, but it's never done right in my opinion. In the same way, I know the characters fight aliens, but that doesn't mean Gantz is ever mature in the way it portrays aliens, nor does it need to be. I've come to the conclusion that everyone who uses pretentiousness and, respectively, pretentious to describe works of fiction uses the words very poorly, and I want to clear that out too. The reason why many people think Code Geass would be considered pretentious, or at least why I heard people say this is the case, is because the anime has a ton of fanservice and official erotic art commissioned to different artists, but in reality all official and packaged into the official anime art books. Apparently Code Geass is an anime which takes itself seriously, but once again that's very wrong. To say Code Geass takes itself seriously is the same as saying Claymore, Elfen Lied or Lied, Mirai Nikki or Kamega Kill take themselves seriously, which they probably intended to, but they don't, and here is why. To me, you can only use pretentiousness as an argument when relating to a character in the plot, but when this same character takes part in a garbage show, you can no longer call the show pretentious because the anime doesn't take itself seriously anymore. Yes, you may take it seriously because you think you've wasted your time watching it, but I feel people often tend to lose sight of what pretentious anime really is. An anime is nothing without its characters, and we will get there, but that's my problem here. If a character is anything close to pretentious, yet they become victims of contrivances upon contrivances within the story, that argument no longer holds any weight and becomes irrelevant. By that same token, when When I hear people say Gantz is pretentious, I can only offer silence in response because it's baffling to me how anyone could consider Gantz pretentious. To make a very long argument short, pretentiousness can only reek from a character and their actions in the plot, but if said plot is already broken, then it simply doesn't work. And it's the same here. Because the plot of Gantz is broken beyond belief, and we will come back to this later. Getting back to my original argument, there is a saying which clearly describes Gantz. Ideas are worth nothing, execution is everything. This couldn't have been more true with Gantz, because you see a few things here and there which belong in a very good anime, especially with characters. Now, to be honest, there are not many ways you can mess up a plot unless the writing is so shit that it forces the characters to break the plot themselves, and Gantz is seriously pushing it. I think the summary of the plot I gave at the beginning of this review goes to show you how complicated Gantz is supposed to be, but it really isn't. When boiled down to its absolute basics, Gantz is nothing more than a regular shonen about high school students fighting inside a death game, and I've seen this concept before all too much. God. Jokes aside, the majority of the plot problems in Gantz stem from its characters and the way they function within the plot. And with that, the time has come to talk about the characters in Gantz, because you can't have a good anime without at least some sort of decent characters. The characters in Gantz have been lobotomized, both literally and figuratively. I have never seen an anime completely butcher its characters in so many ways and be so nonchalant about it, and I've seen fucking Mirai Nikki, Elfen Lied, and other garbage of this nature. This is horrendous, and it is a fucking insult to every character that took part in this anime in some way or another. It's infuriating to realize how much Gantz doesn't give a fuck to capitalize on the few good characters it has, and it's mostly what causes me to deem this anime terrible. The anime has a few select shitty characters, and it pushes for them as if they were the second coming of Jesus Christ. And let me tell you, they fucking suck! Now, it's close to impossible to have characters worse than Yukiteru and Yuno, unless you were intentionally trying to, but some of these characters are so close, it's worrying. One of them being Kei Kishimoto, because she's easily the worst fucking character in this anime for several reasons. I would go as far as to say she's the main reason this plot is so fucking contrived, but I would be lying since she never contributes to the plot whatsoever. Her irrelevance to the plot is simply infuriating, and I know I've already used this word before, but there is simply no other way to put it. Whenever she's on display, or on the screen rather, it's either for some fan service or for another shitty flashback of her suicide, which you've already seen in the first episodes and have already seen in the current episode you might be watching right now 5 fucking times. I get it. It's a sad moment, and Kurono even tries to support her the best he can, but there is no way to fix a character this fucking broken, so it only makes me angrier to see him try. As I previously said, I understand it's sad and what I'm supposed to feel, but how the fuck do you expect me to be sad when the first thing I remember about this woman is the size of her chest? The tonal disparity is out of control. For the last time, as sad as her backstory is, it's an emotional matter, and I would be crying too if this wouldn't be making my blood boil. The times when Kishimoto is in her suit and in the battlefield, she's about as useful as she is for sex, which is to claim she isn't. I've never seen a character this fucking useless in my life, and keep in mind that I am the kind of guy who's more into shonen than slice of life, so color me surprised when I realized she is the fucking worst. I guess the best way to describe the extent of this is to analyze Kishimoto's actions during each and every fight in this anime. This must be done in order to prove really just how bad it really is. When they fight the green onion alien, she does nothing. When they fight the boss, she does nothing. When they fight the robots and the boss, she does nothing. When they fight the statues and the giant alien statue boss, yet again, she does nothing. I can't fucking comprehend how anyone would think such a character would be of any use in an anime like this. I guess it's kind of a good thing, because this helps Kurono develop as a character, and in fact even shows the audience that he's not a complete piece of shit. At some point, he wanted to have sex with Kishimoto, but he didn't because this pink-haired, brain-dead idiot started crying over the same shitty flashback event. Kurono stops, and this scene is easily one of my favorite because the anime remains very consistent with the relationship, or rather, should I say, their friend-zone-ship. What I mean by that is, Kurono knows all too well that Kishimoto loves Kato, and he accepts this even if he is quite affected by it, even in battle. In more ways than one, this helps him prove that he's way more skilled than anyone in this anime altogether. Beyond that, Kishimoto's character is one of the main reasons characterization works in this anime, along with Kato and Kurono, and that's because Gantz understands pacing very well during most of the show's seinen parts. Whenever Kurono interacts with any of the characters, it feels very natural and it's great. I think my biggest problem with this anime is in fact Kishimoto, because her character makes no sense whatsoever. The tonal disparity in her scenes make this so much worse, and when she fights, she just messes it all for everyone else. You know, I keep saying Photokano is a terrible anime. It's bad. It's very bad, and I often refer to it as a clumsy mess of a romance anime which struggles to make sense of its fist-fucked plot it has, but also because the characters are extremely lackluster. And the same could be said about Gantz, if only because I don't really know what I was supposed to feel while watching most of this anime. I mean, yeah, I loved the fight scenes, and I loved the design of the aliens, that is still true, and sure, I certainly was supposed to feel sadness about Kishimoto when she died, and sympathy for Kato, but the actual effect this scene had on me was vastly different from whatever the anime's original intent was. Gantz expects me to get invested with this woman when she does nothing to support the person she claims to love more than life itself, and then expects me to feel sad when she dies, but refuses to acknowledge how insignificant she was to the plot. I am not exaggerating when I say that if you remove Kishimoto from the anime or replace her, you'd have the same plot progression, if not a much faster and interesting plot. Case in point, if you replaced Kishimoto with, say, Sakuraoka, the anime would be fucking Shakespeare compared to what it is now. And it was at that moment that I realized something horrific. To my absolute fucking surprise, I actually missed Sakura. For those of you who don't know the basics, Sakura is supposed to be part of Naruto's team, but often does nothing to help Sasuke or Naruto in battle. However, during Shippuden, which is season 2, she becomes a medic with skillful regeneration techniques, which allows her to be on a level with the Kage. The gist of it is that as much as Sakura may seem useless, she actually does things, and if it's not at the very beginning, she definitely helps during the ninja war and at the very end of the anime. My problem being that Kishimoto never does anything, and because the anime had nothing else to do with her, it decided to kill her in the worst fucking way possible, under the justification that she saves Kato, which is a horrendous way to justify the fact that the direction shot itself and Kato simply didn't fucking move when he should have. To think someone as mentally unstable as Kato wouldn't move from the fucking statue's aim is asinine. But the anime needed some use for Kishimoto, and well, this scene which follows only makes me hate her more, because seeing Kato sad in this anime was a legitimate pain for me. I like Kato in this anime, and that says a lot considering how contrived he is sometimes. Before we talk about him though, I have to mention more contrived bullshit that the anime tries to make you swallow. When they kill the statues, one character steps in some alien blood and somehow becomes an extra boss for that specific fight. Not only does this make no sense whatsoever, but why would the guy attack the Gantz team to begin with? He was one of the ones who helped kill the statues. The anime never fucking explains beyond a simple "why are you killing us?" To make it so much worse, the guy becomes a fucking lizard or some sort of reptilian monster at the very end, killing Kato with his tail in what I could only describe as the most bullshit way to die ever, officially. This is horseshit! I said earlier that the anime understands pacing very well, and that's true, except on 2 occasions when the anime kept dragging the scene for seemingly no fucking purpose at all. Like the time the group needs to save Nishi. You would best remember this asshole, by the way, cause we're going to come back to him. The next instance is when Kurono is in that hallway with his gun in his hand and steps on a baby bird. And well, the anime tries to create tension. It's shit because he doesn't shoot his fucking gun. This also happens when they were debating whether to shoot the fucking statues, and they could have killed them so much more easily, rendering the episode useless. But the anime fucking blows, so it decides to drag it on. If you've ever found yourself yelling "shoot the aliens" in this anime, whether it be with Kishimoto or with everyone else in the last arc, then I truly understand. Gantz does have some good characters, so let's talk about them. The easiest way to begin here is to mention Kurono, since the anime's first 5 minutes introduces us to him and his teacher, who becomes relevant to the plot later. In this scene, Kurono sees his teacher naked and imagines what she looks like, but his classmates notice him getting a hard-on and they laugh at him. Later that day, Kurono is seen at a subway station, and this entire subway scene is very good because the anime does exposition in a very interesting way by having the viewer hear Kurono's thoughts and most of his mind. This works very well when the anime has to create tension. The show remains consistent in doing so throughout the rest of it, which was pretty cool. At the subway station, Kurono meets a childhood friend of his, that being Kato Masaru. Kato is seemingly a meaningless punk who is only capable of being intimidating, but the anime does a very excellent job at explaining his real intentions and develop his actual character. When you get to know him, Kato can be as intimidating as he can be a teddy bear, and it works very well in this anime. We will get to him in a second, but whenever Kurono interacts with relevant characters, you can hear what he really thinks, which just adds to this anime's ability to create a very likable yet relatable high school student. Because let's be honest, in today's anime it's very hard to relate to anyone, at least in my case, but Kurono is extremely easy to relate to. Mainly because he's an asshole at first sight, like most of us. He's a horny asshole at that, who has porn plastered all over his walls, and he had porn magazines in his bag, and the funniest thing to me was that when he came back to life, the only thing he could worry about was people's opinion on him after finding that porn magazine in his school bag. Once again, Gantz hits home with Kurono as a character because he watches porn, and let's be honest here, who doesn't? Moving on, Kurono struck me as a very interesting character in ways that I couldn't describe past him just being a very dumb yet realistic character. This is the best example of a morally fucked up character who would kill to survive, yet questions it every time, but is eventually consumed by all the things happening around him and no longer has any humanity left in him. He's pushed so far, he even attempts to shoot Gantz with his own weapon. I guess this is some sort of a fan service or wish fulfillment in itself, because we've all wondered what would happen if someone shot Gantz in this anime, and I am ready to bet money on that. At the end of the day, Kurono just works in this anime in every possible way. I said the pacing during the robot episode is bad, but this is also good in a way, since we're not dealing with a regular shonen protagonist who has supernatural powers. Kurono is in no way overpowered, and here he didn't have his suit on during most of this fight, so it was all the more unnerving to watch, and I could seriously feel the tension in the air and relate it to everything he did during that episode. Most of his actions in the anime make sense, like when people refuse to shoot the statues and he finally does it first, but also when he argues with Kato over which one should shoot, because clearly Kurono wanted Kato to shoot so he could finally progress in the game somehow and get points. One thing I didn't mention is that you're supposed to kill as many aliens as you possibly can to actually get points. Once you get 100 points, you are free, then you beat the game. A very seemingly simple concept at first sight. It's sort of predictable why most people die in this anime, but it's not any less fucking infuriating, especially when you consider some of these characters were actually decent, if not even good. I'm talking about Masanobu Hojo, what a name, Mikada Kanda, Tetsu Nemoto, and Sazayo Sudamura, all being characters who have gotten decent screen time and seriously did way more than Kishimoto to help finish the game, which is sad considering she's got more screen time than all of them combined. Now, I would like you to pay more attention to two of these characters in particular, Sazayo and Hojo, because this is just outrageous. They end up being trapped in a room full of these smaller sized statues, and then the anime cuts to two other people running away to inform Kurono and Kato that they needed backup. This entire ordeal took an entire 3 minutes, and I'm serious because I counted that. Yet when Kurono and Kato get to the room, Hojo and Sazayo are cut in half. I should also mention that they're shown kissing before Kurono and Kato and the rest enter the room, and Kato almost has a mental breakdown. Then again, that's no excuse not to move when a statue is attacking you, so if any of you thought I forgot about this little detail, well no, I haven't. The time has come to talk about Kato because he's easily my favorite character in this show for several reasons. I guess I need to get this out of the way first, but Kato is simply a form of fan service for people who aren't really the fighting type in real life, like myself, and it's not a bad thing because he's mostly done right. The problems come when he's unable to remain consistent on the battlefield. In the earlier episodes, Kato is told that a man by the name of Chiaki Onizuka is looking to fuck him in the ass and that he should watch out. Kato asks where he is, finds him in a toilet taking a shit, and beats him to a pulp. This is particularly interesting in what it establishes. Kato is constantly in a very frail mental state, and it shows. Several times he's seen clenching his fists in class, trembling and shaking, and things come to a peak when he has to defend his brother from his aunt. He pushes her and breaks some glass too for some dramatic effect. Now, all of that is fine and good, but Kato's character starts to crumble when he can't shoot actual aliens during the game. This causes him to almost die early on, and he still refuses to shoot later on. This is a point A and point B situation. If the writer's intent was to have Kato overcome his fear of shooting aliens, then they went about it very poorly. And we never got to point B anyways, because Kato dies despite him finally shooting his gun. This baffled me, but I decided to somewhat let it go, despite it being contrived bullshit. I think it was very good how the anime showcased some of society's problems, like the serial killers which we see later in the anime. These two people are mentally unstable, but in a much more profound way than Kato himself. They are seen killing homeless men, and all of that is before Kato dies. Before they actually fight the final couple of statues, Kato, along with Kurono and Kishimoto, come across one of the corpses that these people left behind, and Kato questions the validity of his own wish, that is to go back to the real world. A real world where maniacs kill homeless people for seemingly no reason whatsoever. This was very nice to watch, and it was one of the saddest moments in the anime for me because, as stated before, Kato is my favorite character. The anime doesn't do him much justice, especially with some of the shots he's in. There is this one specific shot which my friend pointed out to me, a seemingly normal shot of Kato, but he told me Kato looked really sad and I didn't understand why until he used a filter on the screenshot and I immediately laughed my ass off. Now, that's all secondary stuff, because at the end of the day, as good as some of these characters really are, the anime crumbles on its own stupidity and it becomes a complete train wreck, which is a sad thing to have to come to terms with. To my dismay, the anime's final 3 episodes or so are completely out of control when it comes to bullshit and are ridden with so many goddamn plot holes and inconsistencies you might as well refer to Gantz as just another shitty shonen, because that's what it ends up being. It isn't until you decide to analyze this seemingly good consistency that you realize the anime had long ago spread its butt cheeks and had started shitting all over your face since the very beginning. At the end of the statue fight, Kurono is the only one to have survived, which is moronic to say the least, and a shit decision by whoever wrote the script for this anime, since Kurono had lost far too much blood to have me believe he would survive such a fight, especially when Kato almost died because of a broken hand early in the anime. That's when the shit really starts to stink, because Kurono survives, yet Kato and others die much more easily. Gantz brings more people who have died in the room, and then Kurono attempts to explain what's going on, but he is interrupted by Gantz, who starts making him hallucinate. What the fuck? This is never explained in the anime, nor is it really established at any point that Gantz himself has the ability to cast illusions on anyone he has in the game, so this is yet another fucking convenient plot device the anime uses to convince the rest of the people in the room, including the 2 maniacs, that they should all unite and kill Kurono, since his quote, the alien. I guess this was done in an attempt to symbolize that Kurono is very strong and that he's the final boss, but I can't let that pass because it's bullshit. I could go on for another hour or 2 on how inconsistent these 2 assholes really are, but let me say this. The anime's pathetic attempt at making the viewer feel sympathy for this idiot who kills people for the hell of it is seriously laughable. I find that to be absolutely hilarious, not because of what he does. Homicide is not comedic relief. This asshole really makes a solid point when he questions whether it's morally justifiable to kill those aliens or even send them up there, and speaking of, who the fuck knows if they're still alive up there? Kurono doesn't know this, yet he keeps claiming sending them up there is what his original intent always is, meaning he doesn't want the aliens to suffer, but he can't possibly know that. I guess I'm the stupid one for questioning the anime's ridiculous fucking logic. Before I end this, I have to mention that there is a scene in this anime where the characters are seen walking down the stairs. This is before the first set of characters dies, by the way, and you can hear everyone's thoughts and motivations for wanting to kill the alien and get back home. And one of those characters exclaims in his mind how confident he is in the fact that he will fuck Kishimoto or Big Tits before he dies, and I found that to be very funny to say the least. Now clearly, Gantz has shown to be capable with its comedy and even violence, since violence and sex in Gantz are things which happen on a basis. It never once tries to make you feel like the fan service is the most important aspect of the anime, and I guess to this show's credit, it does fan service very well, so I can't complain much about that. I almost forgot about this, but the most infuriating thing about this anime and the way it does exposition is that whenever it tries to show flashbacks of all of Kurono's friends who have died, these idiots kept showing this Nishi asshole, and I couldn't understand why, because he hated pretty much everyone, and even if he died, I didn't feel sad for him in the slightest. I didn't even mention that everyone dies again for like the 4th time in this anime, and we're somehow supposed to feel sad as if we could get invested with anyone in this anime before they fucking die. Short answer, we can't. If you thought Mirai Nikki was bad because it developed backstories for its characters and then it killed them, you are wrong. If you thought Akame ga Kill was bad when it did this twice in a single episode, you are wrong once again, because Gantz goes bonkers with this and proceeds to kill at least 7 characters in the span of 15 minutes. Characters which had actual backstories and reason to exist in this anime, which is very, very jarring. This was done long after the anime establishes that they are in a safe position in regards to the game, since they beat a ton of aliens so they could rest. The anime then proceeds to do this several times. This concept somewhat works in Gantz because having 20 or so characters with no backstory is inherently worse than killing all the characters you don't want to develop. I held back on the ending for Gantz because it's horrendous. The ending essentially consists in everyone dying and Kurono coming to this startling revelation that no one gives a flying fuck about at this point because I was already infuriated about everyone dying. Kurono hallucinates his way into the subway station like a drunk moron. He realizes everyone Gantz had in the game were people inside that subway station at the time, which, you know, begs the fucking question whether Gantz chose to kill those people in real life intentionally before bringing them inside the game, but the anime stopped making sense a long time ago, so I just didn't know anymore. Kurono jumps into the tracks, sees a train coming, runs on the tracks like at the very beginning, and then claims he will, quote, win the game. Then Gantz just disappears. Yeah, you guys understand the gist of it, so I guess I'm done with this horrible plot. The symbolism in Gantz is so fucking hollow that if I have to stare at Kishimoto's face for a single second more, I might seriously just explode. I also left out the fact that the writing peaks in stupidity at the very end because it fails to let the viewer know what the fuck is even going on or what happened. Did everyone make it? Will they remain dead despite Kurono beating the game? These are all questions which will remain unanswered, and I don't plan on reading the manga anytime soon, mostly due to time constraints, but that doesn't matter now. Certainty is quite vague. The certainty that I fucking hate this anime is about as true and accurate as the certainty that I loved it, which means I don't really know. The anime is factually terrible, yet I can't really bring myself to put it on a level with Mirai Nikki because that anime is much worse, in the fact that it's not really enjoyable at all to me. While being just enjoyable doesn't save Gantz from being criticized, and if you've watched this review until the very end, you can probably already know that, but as bad as Gantz really is, it's honest, and I wouldn't like it any other way. I think Gantz suffers from many problems which aren't really related to the manga, because to my eyes, the anime didn't tell a story worth telling. It's clear to me that the anime cherry-picked arcs which it considered good to tell in a story, but not a coherent one. I feel that had the anime taken the time to cover the entirety of its manga counterpart, this could have been an excellent experience, and still, if you were to describe Gantz the anime to me in its current status, I would be interested, to say the least. But as it stands, fuck Gantz. I was so conflicted in regards to what to give this anime as a rating that I had to come with a new rating just for it. It's been 2 years coming, and I'm finally glad to be able to say this on camera, but I've watched Gantz 5 times now, and by the time this review comes out, that number will likely be higher because Gantz is fun to watch, but sadly, it fucking sucks. If there is anything you should really take away from this video, is that I recommend you to go watch Gantz. Don't wait any longer to go and watch it, because if you want a kick-ass experience with great music, then you will love this anime to shreds. And that's a guarantee. I only have one more thing to say. Fuck this! Thank you guys for watching and have a good day.